also started building new contracting to have built new construction homes in Florida. And the Florida real estate is really what built up quickly, but also crashed the hardest. If you're reaching out to somebody, don't waste their time. And if there is room in the deal, give somebody a slice of the deal. Like, I don't have to get a piece of every deal every time somebody asks me a question. And obviously, back then it was a completely different market than we're in now, but we built up a pretty big portfolio and we ended up losing it all and had to start from scratch.
Hey guys, this is Sharad with REsimpli, host of the REsimpli Podcast, bringing you a very special guest, Derek Dombeck, on this podcast. Derek, welcome to the REsimpli Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Derek, get us started. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? What do you do in real estate? Yeah, how did you get started?
Well, I live in the upper Midwest. I'm in Wisconsin, and most of the business I do is within the state of Wisconsin. I've conducted real estate transactions in about 4 or 5 states in my career, but which started in 2003. And when we started back then, it was really a buy and hold model. However, the real estate crash of 07 kind of forced us into a different model. So we started flipping houses, and obviously back then it was a completely different market than we're in now. But we built up a pretty big portfolio, and we ended up losing it all and had to start from scratch. So reinvented myself primarily through creative deal structuring, raising private capital, bringing on partners, staying away from institutional capital, quite honestly. And I have almost not used any institutional capital since that time. So we actually got to a point where we raised more capital than we could keep busy, and we started lending money to house flippers and landlords. And I co-owned a hard money lending company for 10 years up until recently. So I'm passionate about creative deal structuring, negotiating, learning how to talk to people. I teach people how to do that. And that's the short version of the last 21 years.
That's amazing. You've done a lot in last over 2 decades. How did you get started in 2003? Like what were you doing before that? What led you to real estate?
I had a construction background, so
Okay.
I was good with, working with my hands. I had built my own personal home. And when I started to dabble, it was buying some fixer-upper rentals in my local area. And then a few months into my business, I also started building new construction or contracting to have built new construction homes in Florida. And the Florida real estate is really what built up quickly, but also crashed the hardest. I've always been entrepreneurial, but learning how to not do everything myself was probably the hardest thing, because you just can't scale if you're swinging your own hammer and stroking your own paintbrush.
So you started out buying buy and hold in 2003, and then 2007, 8 crash kind of just wiped out your entire net worth pretty much because you were over leveraged.
Well, that's the thing. At the time we did the deals, we were not over leveraged.
Right.
Well, when the property values, the worst one I had, it went down by 75%. And
Wow.
so it was leveraged at 80%, but the math just didn't work out. And we had no control. We had bank financing on everything. The banks were getting shut down, and you couldn't talk to anybody. You couldn't negotiate with anybody. So it took about 3 years, and I did work out short sales on a bunch of the properties. And ultimately, that's when I really became passionate about learning how to negotiate and talk to people, because it's something that almost nobody does, right?
Right.
People will go out and take a training course and learn how to wholesale or flip or whatever, but they don't ever really work on the art of talking to people.
Yeah. And that's where you make your money. If you buy it correct, that's where if you overpay for a property, then there's nothing you can do. So 2007, 8 crash, like basically wiped you out. You're starting fresh, and it took you like about a couple of years just to get back on your feet, while you got rid of your portfolio. And then you started doing fix and flip, like just buy and hold, institutional lending, just left a bad taste in your mouth. And then at that point, you're doing fix and flip. I would imagine because of the crash that happened, it's not easy for you to go to banks and raise money for this. Like, how did you go about, having money for these flips at that point?
Early on, I took on partners. And
Okay.
so, my partner's credit would secure the deal through financing, and my experience was what the lenders were looking at, because my partner didn't have any experience. And I still used institutional financing through that partner for the first couple of years. After that, that partnership came to an end. But during that time period, I was also learning a lot about alternative methods of buying property. So I really like using subject to purchases, options, seller carryback financing, a combination of all of that. And so today, and over the last 12 years or so, I do a fair majority of my business is structured somewhat creatively.
Got it. Like these would be subject to owner financing. Is that like once your partnership came to an end after 2 years, does that force you to get into creative financing, or were you getting into creative financing and then you decided you don't need the partner anymore?
Yeah, I was already getting into creative financing, and that partnership, it wasn't that I decided it was time to end it. It wasn't needed anymore.
Okay,
And
makes
he
sense.
wanted to go a different direction. I wanted to go my own direction. But I feel like everybody starting from scratch, if you're brand new listening to this, go and learn the creative stuff, even if you can get bank financing. Because if you have all the tools in your toolbox, great. But if you're restricted to just one, it makes it a lot harder. So
Right.
I say, can I go to a bank and get a loan today? Absolutely. But that's my last choice. I would much rather pay either a private individual or the seller themselves an interest rate than go and deal with an institution.
Yeah. Can you walk me through, for someone who's listening to this brand new, what's a typical creative financing deal? What does that look like, a creative deal?
Well, there's no such thing as
Yeah, I
typical,
was going to say,
but
I'm sure there's no. Yeah.
let me give you my definition of creative financing, because subject to purchasing is not creative. Options are not creative. Leases, none of those individually are creative. They're just alternative methods of financing. To me, what is creative is when you use all these different structures to solve somebody's problem. Okay, so quick story. I had a woman who needed to sell her house quickly, and this goes back a few years, but needed to sell her house quickly. She was 2 months behind on her payments. She needed $10,000 cash up front. And the numbers, these are Midwest numbers, but she needed $105,000 for the house. She owed about 65, and she was willing to carry a second mortgage for the remainder of the sale price. So we bought it subject to the first mortgage staying in place, gave her $10,000 upfront cash. She carried back the remainder balance at 0% interest, which came out to about 6 years of payments, because I based it off the cash flow that the rent would bring in. And we just had to do about a $5,000 cleaning and painting job to put a tenant in the property. So I have this little religion where I don't like using my own money. So I needed about $20,000 total to catch up the payments, do the little rehab, give her 10 grand up front. So I reached out to a financial friend, and we used his IRA. I gave him 6% interest only payments and 10% of the equity in the future when the property sold. So at this point, I am using zero of my own cash. We fixed up the house. We put a tenant in there on a rent to own, or otherwise known as a lease with an option to purchase. 2 years later, that tenant bought the property from us. Dan got paid back. Dan was the private investor. The seller got paid off. The subject to mortgage got paid off. I put the profit in my pocket. So creatively, we used a sub to, a seller carryback, a participating note with a private lender, and a lease option with the end buyer. So we stacked about 4 or 5 strategies together to structure that deal. That's what I consider creative.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible. Like it's a little bit of every single creative item out there. You stacked it into one deal. I feel like a lot of investors that are starting out, they have this limited belief that it's going to be complicated. It's not, they want to go the traditional route of either wholesaling, or if they have the ability to fix and flip or buy rental. Is that what you notice with, people that you are mentoring, that they have this limiting belief of it's going to be complicated?
They do have that limiting belief, and I think a lot of that comes from the people they spend time around, right?
Right.
If they're getting negative feedback from their friends and family, or they have their own thoughts where I don't have cash, so all I can do is wholesale, well, you're limiting yourself. My biggest mistake, quite honestly, in the first half of my career was I didn't build a network. And moving past, let's say 2010 until now, meeting the right people, expanding my network and learning the strategies. Now, when a deal comes across into our pipeline, if I don't have the answers, I have friends that do. And it's a phone call away. Okay. So if you don't have money, but you can build your education and build your network, then that's how you solve those problems. It wasn't like I magically knew how to structure all these deals. It was, I knew how to conceptually do it, but until you're in a deal, a lot of it
Right.
doesn't really sink in. So I can, give a friend of mine a call and say, what am I missing? What would you do in this situation? And they're my friend. They're not looking for a handout or even a part of the deal, right? We help each other. And that's what I think people have to get through their head. Your limiting belief is really your own unfounded fear that you're not
Right.
going to be able to find the money or you're not going to be able to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And that's all solved with networking.
Yeah. I think, Derek, what you mentioned, I want to highlight, I think that's such a key point. Like I get emails all the time for people that are just starting out, and their email will be very generic. Hey, I'm getting started out. I just want to pick your brain about like what's wholesaling. I mean, I have other things going on. So just it's something when someone comes to me and asks a very generic question that they can probably get a better answer by going to Google or YouTube, I feel like you didn't even do your research on that. But what you mentioned was you knew conceptually how it works. You went to someone more experienced with a very specific situation. And I feel like when someone comes to me about a specific situation, it gets me excited because now you're solving a problem rather than just saying, oh, yeah, for wholesaling, get a property under contract, and then you try to find a buyer, make an assignment fee, versus if, hey, I have this deal under contract, it's a really good deal, but there's some title issues, like what would you do? I mean, those are the kind of things that you would have a much better chance getting answers. And that's exactly what you did. So I think anyone listening, if you're newbie, starting out and you want to reach out to someone more experienced, someone like Derek, just go with the specific question versus if you get, hey, what is creative financing? And then you're gonna be like, all right, you can probably Google or go to YouTube and get a better answer. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was absolutely great.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, please.
If you're reaching out to somebody, don't waste their time, right? And if there is room in the deal, give somebody a slice of the deal, right? Like I don't have to get a piece of every deal every time somebody asks me a question. That's not who I am. But if somebody calls me from, Arizona and it's a complex deal and they really just don't have the paperwork, they don't have the experience, they don't have anything, am I willing to help them? Sure, I'll give anybody 15 minutes. But if you want 5 hours, that's different. So be
Absolutely.
respectful of somebody's time. If you want me to help you with the deal, anybody listening to this, I'll help anybody. But if I got to be hands-on and get
Right.
involved, then cut me in. If it's a quick question, no problem.
100%.
And just be respectful of people in that manner.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Derek, so with these creative deals, is that something that applies to majority of the sellers that you're dealing with? Or you feel like, someone might have a situation where they need cash, and then they need more cash than it's worth putting for a creative deal. How do you handle those sort of situations?
Well, I'm glad you asked it in that way because to me, every lead is a creative deal until proven otherwise. And so people say, well, how do you market for creative deals? You don't. You market for leads. And when you get on the phone or you get in person with that seller, you start finding out what are their challenges and solve their problem. That's the creative part. So I have a little elevator pitch that I give every person I ever talk to that's trying to sell me a property within the first 2 minutes of the conversation. And it goes essentially like this. We buy houses in several different ways. If we pay all cash, that's our lowest offer. If that doesn't work for you, we can possibly take over your debt if you have debt. Or if you don't, we can make payments to you over time. Or in some cases, we actually just lease property and we buy it in the future using what's called an option. I tell you all this so you know there's multiple ways I can help you today, but I am going to have to ask you some questions that most people probably wouldn't ask you. Is that okay? End pitch.
All right.
All right. So with that pitch, I've just gotten permission from them to ask them anything. And if they start to get upset or backpedal, I can say, listen, I'm not trying to, upset you. Remember, I said earlier in our conversation, I need to know these answers to help you. And usually that de-escalates and the negotiation goes on. But I've given them multiple ways right away. And that's what leads to the conversation when they say, well, I really need $20,000 out of this transaction up front. Okay, great. What are you going to use the $20,000 for? And then they tell you, and maybe they don't need $20,000. Maybe they just need five, and you can pay them the rest over time. I mean, it's just a conversation. That's it.
Are you using your low cash offer as an anchor to get creative deal? Is that
Not
something?
really.
Okay.
I mean, you can do that. I don't feel like I have to use that trickery.
Right.
I just tell them matter of factly, here's where my cash offer is.
Okay.
And for me, it's 65% of after repair value minus repairs.
Right.
That's my numbers. And I'll explain to them where I come up with those numbers if I feel like it's necessary. And how I do that is, again, within the first couple minutes of any conversation, I'm trying to determine what's the personality type of the person I'm talking to. If they're very analytical, I'm going to have to give them more details and more data. If
Right.
they're not analytical, which I'm not, I can make a very quick decision off limited amount of information. It's easier for me to talk to that person that's the same as me. Or the third one I really look for is people that are more social conscious, where they're more concerned about what are you going to do with the property versus how much am I going to get for it. Like they don't want you to turn grandma's house into an Airbnb, maybe.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the sooner you can figure out the personality type that you're talking to, you now lead the entire conversation in a way that they hear it. You're not just
Right.
saying stuff to say it. You need to say it so it's heard.
Right. What's the biggest pushback or challenge that you hear back from the seller? Is that something new, something different from what a typical agent or investor would offer them, that you have to educate them on the process?
Again, there's no such thing as typical. If you lead the conversation correctly and you're overcoming their objections before they actually voice their objections, it's very smooth. You don't get a lot of objections. But a typical realtor or a typical wholesaler real estate investor who's just all about the numbers and very impersonal, they're just going to come in and say, well, I can give you $200,000 cash and close quick. Well, or a realtor, I can sell your house and the data says that the average days on market is 30 days. Well, maybe that seller doesn't want a quick closing, right? You don't even know what they need yet. I've bought
Right.
houses where we went under contract and we didn't close on them for 6 months because the seller really wanted to know their house was sold, but they didn't live in Wisconsin year round. They wintered in Florida. So they didn't want to have to move all their stuff before they left. They said, no problem. Here's a contract. You know that you have it sold. We'll close in April when you come back from Florida. Right. But if I would have
Right.
just, glossed over what their needs were and I said, I can offer you this much money and close in a week, that's not what they wanted or what they
Right.
needed.
And then as you're marketing to these deals, like are you using direct mail, PPC? These are like leads inbound, outbound. What's working for you right now?
So we use everything that you can imagine, PPC, direct mail, social media. A lot of referral stuff comes to me from attorneys and accountants and realtors. But for the most part, I would say the majority of our leads come through social media.
Okay.
I wouldn't say they're the most qualified leads. There's more
All right.
trash to sort through, but it
Okay.
still has been and still is our biggest lead gen.
And your marketing pitch, it's not any different from if you were just wholesaling, right? Are you
Nope.
using like quick cash or anything like that? Or just saying, hey, if you're interested in selling your property, we would be interested in buying.
Yeah, very short little posts on social media looking for a fixer-upper house. Like that's
Okay.
the entire post.
Got it.
And
Okay.
then engaging in a conversation through the DMs.
Right. Yeah, I think that's where, like to your point earlier, some people get a little overwhelmed. They feel like they have to do different marketing for
Mhm.
creative financing, but it just a lead is a lead. They're just coming through your funnel, and then you're offering them this creative option of closing on the property. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Is your exit mostly lease option or fix and flip, or a little bit of everything on the back
It
end?
de it depends how I buy it. So if I buy it with really good terms up front, then I'm likely going to keep that property and lease option it out.
Okay.
I don't keep a lot of them as straight rentals. I do like the lease option model. If I'm tying up cash, then we're usually going to rehab it and flip it.
Okay. And then on your background, you have generations of wealth. Like, tell me a little bit about that, the backstory, and what's the significance of that?
Yeah, so the Generations of Wealth, that's actually my podcast and kind of the umbrella over everything I do. So We've years ago, we used to go on a conference on a cruise ship, and the promoters of it decided to retire, so we took it over. So once a year, we do an advanced strategies and network cruise, which is called the Generations of Wealth Voyage. So that's where it started. But since then, we've also established several national masterminds that we host, and that's called the REI Circle of Trust. And we've got some negotiation, a full-blown negotiations training that I have, but I also do what's called the Elite Negotiations Academy, and it's a twice a month coaching where I'll take pre-recorded negotiations, whether kitchen table or over the phone, and for an hour twice a month we'll pick them apart and talk about what was said, how it was said, what was the tone of the entire negotiation. And of course that typically comes into some deal structuring as well, depending. And so all of that is under the umbrella of Generations of Wealth. But what I'm proudest about is our mantra. It's live your vision, love your life. And years ago, when I discovered having a vision for my life, meaning I want to live my personal life the way I want it, and I want to build a business that supports it. I don't want to build a big monstrous business that sucks the life out of me. And that's really what it is. It's not about making money. It's about living your life both spiritually, financially, holistically, whatever it is for you. Live your best life now, because I'm sure you've met people that are working 6-7 days a week that say someday I'll get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, but
Right.
someday doesn't always come, and they, life gets cut short. So
Yeah.
that's what that's all about.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I love like live your vision, love your life. How did you get to that? Like, were you always very clear about the vision of your life, or it took you, maybe the 07, 08 crash kind of, made you sit back and, think about, what are you doing all this for?
No, I was a mess through 07, 08 crash, and I didn't really figure out a vision for my life until about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And I was the typical entrepreneur that was working 7 days a week. I would answer the phone every time it rang because I can't miss a deal, right? So it was affecting my kids. It was affecting my family life. When it's family time and you're telling your children, dad has to get up from the kitchen table from dinner, or you're telling them to be quiet at 8 o'clock at night because you have to be on the phone. That's not fair to your kids,
Right.
and it's not fair to you. And so we got into the around the right network of people. I not only host my own masterminds, but I belong to other masterminds. And when you're in a room full of your peers and they're all telling you something, you should be listening. And that's what I did. It became clear to me that I needed to do something to give back. I've always coached and mentored people on a local basis, but the Generations of Wealth, it's not a coaching or mentoring platform. It's a give back platform. I've been through a lot of stuff. Personally, while we were also losing our portfolio, my wife and I discovered we couldn't have kids naturally. So we were going through, fertilization issues and adoptions and all kinds of stuff that, now we look back and we say it was the biggest blessing we ever had. But at the time, it felt like the whole weight of the world was all on my shoulders. And so I love to support people and help people now to, I don't want to use the word avoid, because I think you do have to go through some of those struggles in order to appreciate life, but at least educate people about the alternatives to just busting your ass 24/7,
Awesome. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, Derek, thank you so much for sharing that. And my wife and I, we also went through multiple rounds of IVF, and it felt like absolute the worst thing ever. But looking back, that was probably the best thing ever because it brought us closer. It made us realize like we were with each other through the toughest parts of our life. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, so you coach and mentor like, students locally and across the country. I always like to ask coaches that come on these calls, what's the number one thing, the trait that you notice it's different between people that end up being successful versus the ones that don't quite make it?
Persistence and consistency,
Right.
because this business and this life is, you're not going to win every time. You're going to have decent batting average and have more wins than losses, but you're going to have problems, and there's going to be, challenges that come in. And if you're an easy quitter, you might as well quit now, because you're going to have struggles.
Is that something that people either have it or don't, or is that something, a skill that people can learn?
It's a mindset.
Right.
It's not even a skill. It's a mindset. I don't remember the quote exactly, but if you believe you will, you will. If you believe you won't, you won't.
Right.
And that's really what it is. You've got to get to a point where, and even if you don't believe it today, you should be around people that help you believe it. But you got to get to a point where you believe you can achieve anything you set your mind to.
Yeah, I think it's a quote from Jim Rohn that you're the average of 5 people that you spend the most time with, personally, professionally. And if you're not picking the right 5 people for your life, then that's probably the most important thing you can do in your life is pick the right 5 people. Like whether it's your professional network, the personally people that you're hanging out with, if you can do that, that makes the biggest difference. Derek, what do the next 3 to 5 years look like for you? Like, what's your vision of yourself and your business over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, getting around the right people, like you mentioned, Jim Rohn. I've been blessed to become a friend and a part of an organization that was Jim Rohn's business partner, and seeing what that network is doing and supporting me in is opening my eyes and expanding my vision. Because once you do have your vision figured out, it should constantly be growing. It should be changing, right? And most people figure out their vision initially and it's all about stuff, versus after you have the stuff, you realize that's kind of empty, and you want more philanthropical achievements or helping others. But in the next 3 to 5 years, I definitely want to expand generations of wealth to a point where I know we're helping more people. Business wise, I've always been primarily in residential real estate. I've got some commercial holdings, but I do want to expand into more commercial and purchasing existing businesses. And from just a personal level, I've got 3 kids that are 18, 13, and 7. And I really want to do whatever I can to bring them up in a way that they have the entrepreneurial mindset, but that they're living their vision. And if their vision is to go and get a job for somebody else, that's great. But if they want to be business owners, that's great too.
Absolutely. Derek, thank you so much. Should wrap up. I have like 5 or 6 quick fire questions for you, and then just try to answer as quickly as you can. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
You only lose when you quit trying.
What would you say is the single most essential trait for success in real estate?
Grit and hard work.
Yeah, agreed. What book would you recommend to our audience that's in real estate?
Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff, and his follow-up book, Flip the Script by Oren Klaff.
And what's your most important passion outside of work?
My family, and I'm very outdoorsy, so I really enjoy being out in nature.
Yeah. In Wisconsin, do you get to spend a lot of time outdoors? You like skiing?
Yeah. I don't ski anymore. I used to, but for me, it's hunting, fishing, camping, that kind of stuff.
What's an interesting or fun fact that most people don't know about you?
I own rodeo bulls, like bucking bulls.
Oh, you do? Oh, that's cool.
And I actually, when I was young, I raced stock cars. So I wasn't born and raised into the rodeo world, but I have never been on a bull until September. 48 years old, and I went and got on a bucking bull. So
nice. Awesome. Yeah. If you could spend a day with anyone, dead or alive, who would you want to spend the day with and why?
Theodore Roosevelt, because I loved the way that he was passionate about conservation of our natural resources in our land.
All right. Thank you, Derek. Anyone listening to this podcast, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and connect with you?
Go to thegenerationsofwealth.com. You can always get a hold of me through those links. Everything that I do, for the most part, is there. I'm on all the social medias. So Derek Dombeck on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. But Yeah.
Perfect.
And if I can help anybody in your audience, don't hesitate to reach out. I love helping.
Absolutely, Derek. We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Derek, thank you so much for being a guest on the REsimpli podcast. Thanks. Have a great day.